All right, back at it.
Yes. So, hello to everybody who's still here. Thank you so much for sticking with us. So, as you probably realize, we'll be having some technical difficulties, but we're sorting it out, and we keep going. The show must go on. So now I'd like to ask Meritocracy to resume what you're talking about. You were talking about growing your portfolio.
Yes. So growing your portfolio, along with decentralized finance, where we have new possibilities in terms of access to digital assets, and part of that is being able to tokenize different real world assets. So, for example, tokenizing common stock and that sort of thing. You're able to track indexes, for example. An S&P 500 index could be tokenized, and it provides a more streamlined way of accessing these sort of assets without having a centralized stock exchange, for example. Funding your ideas. This is a huge one. In Web3, if you got an idea, you can fund it. If it's good enough, people will join, and you're able to raise money for charities. You're able to raise money for products. So I would say this is a very, very important part of Web3. Insurance markets are changing as well. Again, anytime you cut out a middleman transaction, a mediator, and that sort of thing, you're going to improve the cost efficiency of that service. So pretty much any sort of, on a broader note, basically in terms of Web3, any sort of human interaction, any sort of service is provided, there's new possibilities in terms of how we interact with each other. So that the possibilities are really boundless. And with this being a new industry, there's a lot of things we're learning as we go along, and so there's a lot of things that are developing at a very, very fast pace. So whatever I tell you today, it'll probably be different tomorrow. So no. But on the basics, these basic principles will apply, but there's new markets being developed, on the daily. So there's a lot of new possibilities. It's kind of a very fast-paced environment. Being able to manage your portfolio. We have asset managers, things like that, that are able to provide new services for their users and for their clients. Corporations like Fidelity and different corporations like that are beginning to offer over-the-counter services, as well as offering products to all of their clients. I think coming up too. So there's a lot of financial services, even in the traditional finance sector. There's a lot of involvement there being looked at. And it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it to make sure, none of this is financial advice. So it's up to you. It's important that you do your own research to make your own financial decisions. Again, back to the ownership aspect of this. We are responsible for what we do, and we have to make sure that we are getting good financial advice and having trusted advisors and counsel that understand this market and understand these services. So that's very important. Online presence. This is another huge one. Web3 is impacting the presence of social media users and that sort of thing. So a lot of services require you to require a little more information than they really need from their users, and that's to protect them from liability and that sort of thing. But what comes with that, again, is a trust issue and a security issue in terms of knowing who has your data and knowing how it's being used. So Web3 platforms are allowing you to sign in with a digital wallet, which is a cryptographic signature. And that allows you, instead of tying your physical identity, which is not always necessary, we're allowed to identify people without compromising their physical security. So that's a huge important thing. One of the primary pioneers in this area is Brave Browser. So Brave Browser kind of revolutionized the advertising market by allowing their users to consent to advertisements that aren't intrusive. And by doing that, and by giving their information, by giving their attention to these advertisements, they actually receive rewards in the form of in the form of basic attention tokens, which have a real world exchange value. So that's been very big in terms of I highly recommend Brave Browser. It's a fork of Chrome, so it's very similar to all the other browsers you're probably familiar with, but it has the added incentive of blocking intrusive ads and rewarding you for very respectful type of advertisement that you consent to. And so highly recommend that. Social media is a new market that's being that Web3 is being applied to. This is highly in rapid development. The solutions really aren't totally there, but we see things like Lens Protocol is a big one that's being developed, where, for example, one of the problems right now, for example, is if I have a social media account and I develop this following, what happens when the social media provider, what happens if I want to sever that relationship? If maybe I don't agree with their new terms that they've added. Well, when I leave, they get to keep my following, because when I leave, I can't take my followers with me. So that's the primary problem with social media and Web 2, is that you're kind of locked in because you have to make a difficult decision whether to lose this following you built over years. And a lot of times that may even be, if you're an influencer, that may be your primary source of income. So now now they're locked into a service that they don't want, because they want to keep providing the service to their users or their followers. So one of the big developments here is that, like example with Lens Protocol, is when I leave, I should be able to take my follower with me that I built, and so that's one of the big things being in development right now. Also, we have freedom of speech ideas. There's a lot of censorship and that sort of thing currently debated, and I'm sure you've heard. I'm sure you've maybe dealt with this even personally, but in terms of a democratic, your democratic voice being heard, many people believe it is not up to a centralized server centralized service to decide whether your voice matters or not. So I'm of the position that everybody's voice matters. I think that if you are here and involved in a community, then your voice definitely matters. If you're affected by that community, then your voice does matter, and you should be able to speak that and let that be heard. And all right, collaborative work. This is huge. This is kind of down to the nitty gritty here, this is where it's working, is collaborative work. So we have the decentralized autonomous organization, and what that is it's kind of, for example, I'm a contributor at Cap and Dow, and the way we kind of describe it is and you may want to look this up some other time, but an organizational slime mold is kind of like the prototype. Instead of having a top-down hierarchy like most corporate structures, we are able to organize in a very flexible way in terms of where we all contribute, and we kind of find where our talents are best used, and we organize kind of it's kind of autonomously the way we organize and the way the hierarchy is structured. So we don't have CEOs and bosses per se. We have team leaders and contributors to where we all kind of work on the same level, so to speak. So this is allowing new forms of organizations where there's no where the governance is from the ground up. So and for example, at Cabin DAO, we have a token. Our token is a Cabin token, and it is a governance token. So whenever we have proposals, everybody has a say in whether that proposal is implemented. And so that's very important to, in terms of human relationships, it's very important to be considerate of the people that are impacted. And so the DAO is a very huge advancement in human organization, as far as I see it. And the way it's done is through blockchain technology, similar to what we've talked about earlier. Excuse me. You have different types of DAOs. Cabin DAO is a community-focused DAO, and so we focus on building decentralized. Focus on building a decentralized city, and what that means is, instead of a traditional city being geographically centric in terms of how it's located, our city has nodes all over the world. So right now we're early development. We have, I believe it's it's happening very fast. So I think we have 2 nodes right now. I'd have to double check on that, but we are developing at a pretty rapid pace. So and we'll talk about that a little later, but you guys can check that out, and it's very interesting, the advancements we're making there. If collector DAOs, operating systems, service DAOs, a lot of investment DAOs, that's a big one. A lot of people are forming investment groups where they can tokenize their assets and index funds and different things like that, and it allows the members of that organization to all contribute in new and interesting ways. You have grant DAOs that are able to provide funds to people that need it. A lot of charity work and stuff like that's been being done here. A lot of entertainment and media DAOs. And again, the social and community aspect of the DAO is a huge advancement. And so that's something that I'm really interested in terms of providing services to people that previously may have not had access to it. And that's one of the things I'm focused on. So, and you'll have to forgive me, I can't see the slide on my other screen, so I'm going to be depending on you here. All right, gaming. We have a lot of things being developed in gaming industry. We have pay to earn gaming, and in terms of being able to compete and even be rewarded financially in gaming. Metaverse, a lot of augmented reality type games and things are being developed at a rapid pace. And this allows you to, another part of the decentralized part of this is, like I said earlier, when I leave one social media application and I want to go to another, I should be able to take my property with me, my assets with me. And when I say assets, in this case, I'm talking about my data or my profile. And in a video game, if I leave this video game and go to play another one, the character that I've developed there in the other video game, it doesn't. In the previous iterations of Web 2, each game is kind of siloed in their own way to where, but now I can take my character that I've developed and I can take him to another game, and so there's really new and interesting ways we're able to apply that. And NFTs is a big part of how they're able to use that. Content creation. Web 2 content, again, we're dependent on the centralized platform we're using, and all the revenue goes to that platform, and it's up to the platform to pay the creator as they choose. And there's problems with that. The problem with that model is that, there's a lot of exploitation happening there because the creator doesn't really have control over their own product. And through Web3 and the NFT tokenization, there's huge bounds being made in terms of artists being paid for their work. And so you'll see a lot of the NFT art. Obviously, this is a huge thing, and things like musicians being able to kind of take control of their own product and being able to directly interact with their customers in new ways that have never been possible that I've seen. So that's a huge thing. With NFT, you're able to prove authenticity and ownership of an asset, and so it allows direct compensation for that creator or that artist. And also in terms of writing, a lot of advances are being made in terms of writing because a publisher, now can interact with their readers in a direct way, and that enables some new forms of communication. Excuse me. If you go to the next slide, please. All right, DeSci, Decentralized Science. This is huge. We have new research opportunities and scientific publishing opportunities. Instead of a gatekeeping centralized organization being, academic organization being able to control what gets published and what doesn't, we have new research being done. We have peer-to-peer article review being done, and so scientists are able to do their research and raise money and also all sorts of different things like that in a decentralized manner without having the gatekeeping aspect of science. Obviously, the science is something that gatekeeping is not really very scientific mode of operation. Science is all about the scientific method, and that requires it's not formed on consensus. It requires a very rigorous method, and so that should be open to that should be an open discussion. It requires a vigorous debate. VitaDAO is a good example of longevity research. Talent DAO is another academic journal. So those are some new exciting ways about that. So we have some other discussions we had. What else should Web3 include? So again, I would say that anything you can dream up, any sort of human interaction, Web3 has a new and interesting way it can be applied. So really, there's infinite ways to dream this up. There's all sorts of different things being developed. I mean, day to day, I see new stuff all the time that are really interesting that I've never seen before. So it's very interesting. All those things developing. Excuse me. What are some potential issues with Web3 lifestyle?
If I could jump here, so initially when this was designed, ideally would have had people watching us on the live stream and could engage with us. But because we had the technical issues, probably most of our viewers are going to be post-recording. So I was thinking maybe I could try to answer some of the questions. Of course, I'm not an expert myself, but I mean, if that's okay with you.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, so I think that an issue in Web3 at the moment is that it's not necessarily gatekeep because it's permissionless, but it's very hard for non-finance/tech people to feel like they can navigate it safely, because there's also issues with the Web3, or navigate it, like feel like they have a hang of themselves in the space. So I feel like one of the most important things that the Web3 should include is very basic education opportunities. Not only like what we're doing, but like there's a lot of, we're at the level that Web3 developed its own language and its own lingo. So like, what does GM mean? Why does everybody say GM wherever you go? What does shilling mean in the context of Web3? And a lot of other things, which just, Web3 is developing its own culture. So I think maybe ways in which we can make it more available for non-Web3 native/finance tech would be one of the better things to work on. I know there's a lot of education initiatives out there. There's social DAOs who have guilds dedicated specifically for this, but I feel like we haven't cracked the code yet. I don't know. What do you think,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is a big concern of mine, actually. I share this concern. Anytime you have anytime you have something new, we're pioneering this space. So anytime a new space is pioneered, it's not only is education very, very important. So I'm glad you stressed that. That's huge. But not only is that, it's just changing so rapidly. So we have to address some of the issues with, in Web3, you'll hear a lot about onboarding. That's what we call it. And so we have to address some of the onboarding issues on getting people ready to where they can comfortably use these services without, and that's probably one of the biggest. I'm glad you brought that up. That's probably one of the biggest things hindering the development right now is that, we haven't sorted all that out, and so that's just something we have to start really focusing on those initiatives. So that's a good point you bring up.
I mean,
there's
one more point here. Statistically, I think that the people more likely to adopt crypto and try to learn about cryptocurrencies are people who come from countries with not the most stable currencies, which it's a weird argument to make, because with inflation increasing everywhere, none of the fiat currencies feel that stable at this point. But for example, one of the biggest countries to adopt it is Argentina, Brazil, are countries who know how it is to have a currency that you cannot count on. So people who voluntarily join the space are either experts, visionaries who are 100 years ahead of everybody, or people who really need it. But I don't want other people to be left behind just because at the moment you feel like you're in a country where your fiat currency is stable enough that Absolutely. You don't need to learn about this space. But eventually it might not become that stable. Each economic crisis got worse and worse with each phase. So that's something bad.
And one of the big issues as well related to that is, again, since we're pioneering this space, there's a lot of technical, I have a technical background. my education is, I'm an engineer, and my education is in industrial automation. So it may be easier for me to understand and implement these solutions, but there's a lot of people and that don't have that prerequisite training necessarily. And one of the problems that I'm trying to focus on right now is the user-friendly aspect of all this. You know, there still really isn't many user-friendly apps in this space, and I think in 5 years, or hopefully not even that long, but I think in a few years we're going to see more focus on that. And you know, it should be as easy, you know, it should be as easy to use as Cash App. You know, I in a few years, I don't think you're even going to be thinking necessarily about the blocks on the blockchain, or your keys or anything like that. Similar to the way that, you know, when I go to use my online bank, you know, I don't think about how they settle the payments, right? I mean, the end user doesn't need to know all that. The end user just needs to use the service. So part of the layered aspect is we're building this in layers, and we're still kind of we're still at the bottom layers, you know, and at the end of the day, we have to provide services that are usable for everybody, because that's, you know, it needs to be very simple. So, the way I like to say it is, you know, finance should be as easy as you want it to be, you know. So some people might want more, some people might want to get into the technical aspects of it, but there's a lot of people that don't, you know, and they shouldn't have to. You shouldn't need a full education course to use DeFi, you know. It should be where anybody can use it. That's what I think is something where you really got to improve on. So very important. I'm glad you brought that up. Another thing is, you know, right now, in terms of collaborative work and things like that, you know, there's a lot of bounty work, so you can get paid per task on a lot of things, but we're still developing a lot of new methods of constant, stable work. I mean, especially if you're not necessarily in the technical aspect. I mean, if you're a technician, then there's endless amounts of work out there in the Web3 space, and you'll probably never run out of it. But, you know, and there's a lot of other areas where that's not necessarily the case, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that industry broadens out in that way, where we can. I mean, the way I see it, it all comes down to just improving our quality of life, right? And so, the goal of technology is to improve the quality of life. And so anytime, you know, it shouldn't make it more complicated. It needs to make it less complicated. So right now, a lot of this is still a little complicated. And for example, and I'm sure y'all discussed the custody aspect of the blockchain. But, you know, there's a lot of people that have custody or don't have custody of their coin, and I don't think they fully realize the implications of that. And I don't think they're even there's some things you got to understand to keep custody of your coin. You know, technically, there's some technical aspects of the blockchain that you have to understand to securely implement that technology. And so, like we were saying earlier, and that's one of the things we're doing here, is we have to focus on educating people to use it responsibly, because otherwise, you know, you hear a lot of these exploits and things that happen. Most of the exploits that happen, they're not hacks. They call them hacks, but they're really not hacks. They're exploits due to either negligence, or a lot of it's due to social engineering type, you know, manipulation, or tricking somebody into doing something, or, you know, those sort of things. And so we really have to focus on educating the end user to understand what they're doing and understand what they're getting into. And and so that they can use these services responsibly. Because it really is an amazing thing. I mean, I'll say it's changed my life, particularly just in my own life. Like I said, I'm totally bankless, and I don't miss it one bit. I mean, I love it. So there's also challenges that come with this Web3 space being a new industry as well. So there's some challenges we have to address on that. Some of them we've already mentioned, but you know, it's an ever-changing landscape, and so kind of gotta keep up with the times here right now. So
yeah, I'm having an eye on the clock. I think we can spill a little bit, particularly because of the technical difficulties, of course, if you have time. Yeah, in the first question, I feel like what else should Web3 include? We kind of delved into the second question, which is what could be a potential issue with the Web3 lifestyle and how could Web3 native avoid it? And I don't know, from my point of view, I feel like you put a hammer on the nail. Not being an English native speaker, it's difficult sometimes. So
hit the nail on the head.
Yes. So because as someone who also works in decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs, it's for a DAO to work, it has to attract talent. But because the Web3 at the moment is quite small, there's not a huge pool of talent. So there's a lot of issues with not only how to attract talent as a DAO, but also how to retain talent, how to make them stay. Just because the whole space is permissionless and based on voluntarism, nobody is bound by anything to stay with a certain community. So the moment when they feel like it doesn't benefit them enough to stay, they're gonna leave. So I feel like this is a huge issue that is not properly addressed. I mean, there's certain DAOs which do take active measures to mitigate this issue. But I don't know, how do you feel about this issue of retaining talent in Web3?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing, you know. If you're working on a huge product, let's say, it's maybe not just a bounty task, but let's say we're developing a product. One of the things we like, for instance, at Cap and DAO, one of the things, you know, is what happens when your key player isn't, let's say, you know, Web2, they would call it ghosting. What happens when the key manager, your key product guy, just decides he doesn't want to come back, you know? And that's a real issue, you know? And so we have to, when we're developing products and when we're working on these projects, we're always conscious of having some redundancy and having it to where we don't depend on one. Again, goes back to the decentralization. We can't be dependent on one mode of there can't be a single point of failure, you know? And so we have to think in different ways of addressing this in terms of spreading out responsibility and having a resilient, you know, product team. And so those are things we're always mindful of. And one of the things that's I didn't talk quite as much about, but one of the important things right now is, again, the identification type aspect of it. You know, there's kind of still a little bit debated and worked out, but you know, where's the balance between identifying somebody and respecting their privacy, you know? And so the way I see that is, at the end of the day, what we have to, the main principle to keep in mind is relationships should be consensual, right? And so at the end of the day, that level of privacy should be up to the people involved in that relationship. You know, there may be some DAOs that need a little more, or not just DAOs, but there may be some scenarios or products or services that need a little more information. But then, or granularity, if you will. But there's some that maybe don't need any. There may be some that are, there's some things that, like in terms of whistleblowing and things like that, or exposing corruption. There's a great need for privacy to be maintained in those scenarios sometime because of, even physical threats and different things like that. So there's a lot of things we have to work out there too. And also, like we said earlier, I think I mentioned this earlier, but there's a lot of bounty work out there, but not everybody, some people need some stability there. And so one thing you're seeing being developed right now is even there's a lot of universal basic income type ideas being developed. Radical drips is one of the things that is being developed. They have an implementation to where, you can stream funds on a automated regular basis. And so that's working on things like that. One of the things I always try to keep in mind is we want to automate all the trivial, boring stuff, right? So the more we automate the things that don't need human decision making, kind of the menial tasks that are things that the jobs that we don't want to do, it allows us to focus our energy and labor on higher level interactions and more creative work. And so that's one of the things you'll see a lot of advancements in terms of Web3 is it's a lot of creativity being applied in new ways, because we don't necessarily have to worry about all the other stuff we used to have to worry about, so there are challenges, but there's so many new advances that it really is incredible. Some of the ideas that are being presented right now are just stuff that the rest of history before us, at least in recorded history, they could have only dreamed of, and so that's one of the exciting things is, just being able to focus on improving, solving the really difficult human problems that have existed for a long time. I think we're finally at a place to where we can use technology to solve these problems that have existed forever. And so I'm really optimistic about that. And so I'm not naive either, but I'm optimistic about the advances that are being made. So yeah.
No, I totally agree with that. And as you said, there's been in Web 2 particular, I feel like there's been a lot of boundary, incentivizing people to push their boundaries into their personal life and not having to disclose a lot of things about themselves to a lot of centralized authorities. And in Web3, we're trying to allow people to hold their boundaries and still be capable of living a decent lifestyle. So yeah, as you said, the space keeps on building itself, and we as the Web3 community, we're trying to create new products that incentivize and like, for example, what Partnr is currently working on, which is basically allowing people to keep their anonymity and pseudonymity as much as they want, and only share with a potential person interested in employing them or using their services, only sharing what is absolutely necessary for that particular interaction. And it's not only that, there's many more products which are developed in the space, and I think that's this is the right moment to be in the space, because you get to meet all these innovative minds and very future driven people. And it might be because right now Web3 is not necessarily mainstream, but I believe that in 10, 20 years, Web3 is going to be the web. It's going to be the most used form of web that we know so far. So now is the moment to be a part. If you have vision, if you want to build, you have to identify all the issues that we have in the current Web3 and find solutions to them. So people who come after us can actually enjoy a safe web and operate it as safely and securely as possible without having to disclose or infringe on their own personal boundaries as people.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's just one of the things I'm really looking at, because it's such a new space, there's a lot of people right now, and this isn't a criticism necessarily of them, but there's a lot of people, it's kind of a rat race to develop the next cool thing. And I like that, right? But it's kind of like who's going to do the plumbing and who's going to dust the fan? There's a lot of things that need to be done that maybe aren't necessarily financially rewarding, or so one of the things I'm focused on is on the some philosophical type things and education type. There's things that we got to be doing that maybe aren't necessarily part of this race to make the next cool thing, the next cool gadget, right? But there's a lot of things I'm focused on that just in terms of responsibility and that sort of thing that that we also have to tend to, because there will be new challenges with this space, so, and some of them we've already discussed, but I'm looking at really the tokenomics side of it. I don't think enough attention is being paid on economic literacy. So that's one of the things I'm really interested in is really making sure we're there's a lot of classical knowledge that we can apply to Web3, and I don't see enough of that being applied. I think you have a lot of technical geniuses that are working in this space, and I love it, and I'm excited for it. But not all of these problems are new, right? So it's a mistake to ignore the classics, the classical arguments and the classical knowledge that so many great people before have developed. And I think we have to pay attention. We have to kind of look in the past too, and really examine, especially like in terms of the political context. We have to really examine the people that came before us and really see what they've learned and what they can teach us, because every kid thinks they know. It's kind of like the child. It's like every kid thinks they know everything until they run into the real world, And so I don't want us to be that new. I don't want us to be that new kid, the kid. I want us to be mindful of the traditional issues and really take a careful examination of those issues. So that's one of the things I'm interested in as well.
No, I completely second that. I think it's a bit of a tendency in the space, particularly because it's so tech forward and there's a lot of money in terms of value as money, tokens and coins being thrown around, and a lot of stories of people getting wealthy overnight. I think we have a tendency to forget that blockchain and crypto and the web and Web3 are technologies created by people for people, even though they're automated to technology. And the reality is that yes, we have to look up to the big tech geniuses or business developers or so on. But at the same time, we have to appreciate the person who always stays at the door on a Discord and greets everybody, and it's always available to answer questions, and it's willing to spend hours writing a governance proposal or a grant application, and it's always transparent. And at the end of the day, Web3 is not a technology. It's not only a technology. It's not only a space. It's a community. It's a lifestyle, and we have some core values that we should stick to it, which is always being transparent, always being community oriented, and trying to always look forward. These are things we don't really discuss very often, and it's not written in technology, it's written in the community. So it's also important to always look at Web3 not only as technology driven machine, but also the community constantly developing and growing.
Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about people, right? So even technology, at the end of the day, none of this matters without the people. So if you stay people focused and focused on that social aspect of it, I think we'll be okay. One of the kind of what we're talking about still, it kind of amazes me because some of the things I see in this space, and again, you're talking about the technical gurus, and it's like it wasn't that long ago that the technical gurus, I mean, we just got through with Web 2. Web 2 is the same thing. We went through this not that long ago, okay? I'm old enough to remember when this happened. I grew up in the days of the AOL chat room. I mean, I was 8 years old, on the internet, and that was like back when nobody was on the internet. So it's like I'm not too, I'm not naive to, we could, if we're not careful, we can go through the same thing again, and Web3 might just end up being, we have to be mindful of these problems because they're not new problems. And I think Web 2 was here to solve all this, social media was supposed to solve all this stuff too. And they didn't, they dropped the ball, in my opinion, because it just ended up being another corporate maneuver. And so, and they lost that people focused aspect of it. And it became about private ambition and private, really the engagement metric is what Web 2, if I could sum it all up in one phrase, it's engagement metric, and that's not what Web 3 is about. It's not about the engagement metric, because people can't be measured, right? And so we have to look at building resilient relationships that, and that's what I'm very optimistic and very pleased with. The community aspect of Web 3, it's actually blown my mind. I mean, I'm not really good at this whole community thing, but I recognize its importance and I love it. And so it's one of the things that I'm learning that other people are doing a lot better job at kind of showing me what community building is. And it's been very I've been very appreciative of watching these communities grow, and it's actually really inspiring to see all of the great work that's being done here. And I mean, there's so many different people of all walks of life being now having a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging, and there's no bounds to how far this can go. I mean, if there's another person like you somewhere that wants to get involved in what you have going on, or there's somebody else that likes your idea and they'd work with you to make it happen. And so we're kind of in this dream space of being able to really being able to envision any sort of landscape that we want and really make it happen. I mean, I really think that all these things are technically feasible. Not only do I think it's technically feasible, it is. I mean, we're already doing it, So we're doing, for example, at Cabin DAO, we're doing it right now. We have remote work, we have decentralized communities, and we're all over the place. We're all over the world. And I'm in some other, I'm founding some DAOs right now too. And so it's really powerful to see how these things are coordinating and how these things are coming together. And what it really comes down to is we're all really just doing the best we can for each other, and it really comes down to serving your community and serving your fellow human, fellow person, and really trying to improve, again, the quality of life for everybody. And so I'm really encouraged by that mentality that I'm seeing. And my mind's been blown actually in some of these DAOs. It's just really incredible, some of the work they're doing. in terms of raising money for charity and stuff like that. I mean, the charity aspect of it, there's a lot of charities. It's like, if I give to charity, I don't necessarily always know where that money's going, or if it's actually going to be implemented as I agreed to. And that's out the window, because now I can raise funds directly with investors, or I can, and it's all provably on the blockchain. So without a doubt where the money goes. I mean, it's, and so we want transparency there, and Web3 is being able to provide that. And I think you'll see a lot of political and governance issues being solved as well in that space. And I'm really excited about those improvements. So.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who's in Web3 probably feels the same. I'd like to move to the last question, which is a very, very hypothetical question. Well, first of all, do you think there could be a potential future where we have a Web 4? Because, well, this comes from a more philosophical idea. Do you think that the webs were built out of necessity, or they're going to just keep changing based on how technology goes further? And if you actually think there could be a Web 4, how do you think that would look like?
I think that's a great question. I think most human advances, or most change, is done by necessity. I think that's kind of what drives demand. If you look at Web3, we wouldn't have a Web3 had Web2 not fallen short on some of our goals. And I think so it's not just a simple, if we wouldn't be calling it Web3 if it was just a linear improvement, right? So it would just be the web. If the reason we're calling it Web3, as far as I can tell, is because we want to separate. We want to distinguish ourselves differently than the ones that came before us, because there's some issues that aren't being addressed and so really the demand for these problems being solved is what's driving the innovation. Because if there wasn't demand for this innovation, we'd be innovating other things, right? And so the fact that there's people all over the world thinking about the same problem, and we started organizing, I think that's what actually drove this thing, because it kind of came out of nowhere, right? I mean, it kind of came very quickly, comparatively speaking, to other changes. Because a lot of times people are resilient to change. People don't really like a lot of times they don't like change. They like kind of things to be comfortable. So I think, but you're seeing in this space, you're seeing a lot of people jumping headfirst into a big change. I mean, I totally changed my lifestyle and so it's like, it's very, very interesting how that works. So I think in terms of if there was a potential Web 4, I don't know. I mean, this is hypothetical. I think, I don't know. Web 4 might be a little scary for me. Web 4 might be a total immersion virtual. I kind of want to keep, like in Cabin Dow, for example, we're very focused on in real life experiences. So I don't ever want to neglect the importance of real world interactions. So as far as, even though we're excited about all this technology and stuff, Cabin Dow places a huge, this is a central importance, or a central theme of mantra of ours, if you will. It's very important to keep that real life IRL interaction, because that's really where collaboration really and creativity really shines, is having that real person to person interaction. I don't think we're ever going to replace that. And so, but if there was a Web 4, that might be what it is, that might be a replacement of that. And I'm not sure, I'm not going to be ready for that. I don't think I'll ever be ready for that. And so I kind of want to always be mindful of the real physical interactions and how important those are, just from a physiological respect. We as humans need that social interaction. and that's just, if you look at human development from a developmental stage as far as children and how they grow up and stuff, this is where's the line? Where's the boundary of how children use technology and that sort of thing? That's something we're gonna have to really kind of start looking at more. Is how does these technologies affect our social interaction and our psychological development? And so that might be what Web 4 is a total immersion in the metaverse, a total kind of like once technology and we could think of all sorts of interesting science fiction type scenarios there where that might fly. So I kind of want to keep me personally, I kind of want to keep a boundary there somewhere. I'm very mindful of that. We'll just say that.
No, I totally get you. I think that if there's going to be a Web 4, probably it's going to be to sort some kind of issue that might arise in Web 3 that we're not aware of, like some big chunk issue, not like small fixtures that we're coming up at the moment. 1 second.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're probably right. Like I said, the demand is what drives innovation, right? So I think you're probably right. We'll have some issues in Web 3 that are, I mean, you've heard the saying, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So there's a lot of things we're feeling like it's new, but these aren't new problems. They're really not new problems. They're new implementations. They're new, they're new perspectives and new, but really at the end of the day, these are problems that have existed since time immemorial, so it's just a new approach to trying to solve it, and every generation tries to solve it a different way, and I'm hopeful that we can solve some of these problems. And just like I said, if you're improving the quality of life for people, I think that's a good enough goal for me. If I can leave a good mark on this world, that's kind of like I'm satisfied with that,
Yeah, I totally second that. So we're gonna move further, and we have the take-home points. I personally think that our conversation was quite enriching, so you probably it was helping you get more aware of the space, but you might have gotten lost. So we have some take-home points for you. You can read them. I don't know, Med Operator, do you feel like you need to add anything to this?
Sure. Do you want me to read it? Did you say? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, it's all right. Do you feel like you should add anything to these points, or do you think it's okay? Usually just to summarize for people who might have gotten lost in the whole conversation.
Yeah, I will. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that's difficult, I have to be mindful of, is I'm kind of native in this space, and so sometimes when I'm discussing it with people, I'm not sure where they're at. I'm not sure where they're following, especially since I can't see anybody here. I have to be careful because I forgot what it was like. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where I had to learn all, so it's very challenging to, and I did it all by myself. I didn't really have any. So I do remember that. I do remember some of it being very, it's kind of overwhelming sometimes. There's so much and so much to kind of absorb. And so I think those points listed up there are really good, but really the applications are endless, so I mean, it's really up to, everybody in their own mind space to create new and interesting ways to apply this technology. And so really it's the way I see it is, in terms of, now, forgive me if this is too American centric, but the way I see it is, this technology is the founding fathers' dream. It's the American dream. It's having a voice. It's democracy, being able to represent yourself and and
Mhm.
um, self-governance and that sort of thing. And so it's important that, but the new, it not only is it some individuality there, but it's community there, right? And so it's this hybrid of being able to have your voice heard, but also being able to work with other people to build new and interesting things and concepts. And so I'm very encouraged by all that. And yeah, and those are really good take home points there. Um, and
No,
also, if anybody, I'm not sure because I can't see any questions or anything, but if anybody wants to contact me later or whatever, I've given you my contact information. You're welcome to share that, and I'll be glad to help anybody on this journey. So
yes, we have some a question or two. I'll ask you in a moment. I really like the founding fathers. Nobody in this meeting, and probably not a lot of our listeners are American. But I think it's important to mention different cultural basics, like base for why we joined the space. Because when you're in such a multicultural space, it is very easy to forget that we come from different spaces and we might not necessarily have the same assumptions or the same
absolutely.
drivers of being in the space. So I think that was a very lovely reference. Moving forward
Well,
for yeah,
you
so
have
go ahead.
a lot of your audience is in India, right?
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, we were literally just talking about this yesterday in one of my groups that I'm a part of. We're very excited about India. I mean, the stuff that's coming out of India, we're amazed. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff, man. And so we're all on board with everybody over there. Like we're with you. So I'm very impressed. For I think like for example, I use Polygon every day. I think those guys are from India. I mean, there's a lot of great things coming, and I think I'm very excited to see what India has to offer here. So very encouraged by that.
No, we're. I mean, I'm personally, but I think the rest of the team. So we're very bullish on Indian talent. So yeah, guys,
Absolutely,
everybody watching home, we believe in you.
we're
Uh,
cheerleading.
so we're looking forward to see what the new arising talents are going to come up with in the space. For the people who are going to have access to the slides, I prepared an extra article that you can read in your own time. Just press the link when you get access to the slides, and it's mostly about DeFi because DeFi is quite a big subject. So you might want to take the time to look at every single little aspect of DeFi and deepen your knowledge beside of a few minutes of conversation with Met Operator. All right, let's see. This was everything in the presentation. We have a question or two, which is from Kriti herself. She asks, how is it fair to give governance rights to all community members if not everyone is qualified enough? So it's a question about meritocracy, basically. How do you determine meritocracy, I assume, in a decentralized, pseudo-anonymous space? And is it fair to just give someone proper governance right just because they join a space?
That's a great question, and
I'll also add a
that's
little more context. Sorry to cut you.
go for it.
A little more context is more in terms of saying, A, what is happening, what is, I mean, from a liberalist perspective as well as democratic perspective, I love the idea of community-based voting, and I concur with a lot of ideas that you shared now. But what is happening in the DAOs these days, ecosystems in terms of even voting rights, is people vote for on proposals that don't necessarily serve the purpose of the DAO or the mission of the DAO, but they vote on proposals that serve themselves. So if let's say this particular proposal is from a DAO which is a little famous, and I can get some skin in the game by vouching in favor of the proposal, then I vote in. If I don't really see immediate returns from there, then I don't vote in. So the question is more from coming from this point of view of not everyone out there is serving the purpose of the mission, although it is intended for the democratic aspect is intended for the same. How do we curb out such elements or add processes to make sure that decentralization and the intention comes across as right versus giving people self-serving intentions, which is the same problem that's happened in web 1, web 2, and even before that. So this is a I think generic problem, but web 3, which is web 3 is trying to tackle, but I see it reoccurring in like front of our own eyes. So how do we tackle it together?
Oh, this is a great question, and it's interesting because I mean this is something I've brought this exact thing up to several different groups. You know, it's one thing one thing that comes with, you know, when we talk about ownership, you know, there's a duty and responsibility that comes with that, right? And so there's some interesting implications there. And in terms of governance, you know, we can't just be rubber stamping approvals that serve our own purpose, right? And so part of the community building aspect of it is, and I think that's, like you said, it's a generic problem. It's really a problem of democracy and as a whole is, how do you keep the mob from just ruining the mission, right? And so one of the things,
Precisely.
I'm sorry.
No, I said precisely. All of us know elections. I mean, people are given a voice not because everyone has a free speech regardless of caliber, which is a lot more tied to emotions versus credibility or meritocracy per se. But the same question of how do you make sure the mob, I mean, we want to make sure they're happy at the end of the day because everyone needs to have a voice. But at the same time, the collective decision shouldn't be ruining something great.
Yeah. So one of the things in that regard is, not everybody gets a vote per person. Okay, so this one vote per person is not really going to be that advantageous. There might be some communities that want to do that. The fortunately, the idea with this whole governance token is you can design it however you want. So there might be some communities that want everybody to have an equal say. That might be acceptable for some communities. As far as the things I'm interested in, it's probably not acceptable because, you know, we have a mission here. You know, I have objectives that I'm trying to accomplish. So it's not enough to say everybody gets a voice. I should hear everybody's voice, right? So there's a difference between hearing everybody's voice and accommodating them the best that I can within the mission. But so there's a form, you know, in terms of like, that's kind of what representative democracy is, right? So there's some sort of delegation implementation here that, you know, not everybody, you know, it's kind of like at a corporate meeting, you know, everybody doesn't get a say. It's the board members, right? It's the people who have stake, who have skin in the game, the people that are aligned with the mission. And at Cabin, for example, you know, you earn cabin by working, you know, so that's the skin in the game. So we're all aligned on that mission, and you can't really buy. I mean, you can. We're not listed on an exchange, so the primary way to get cabin is to put some work in, you know. And I mean, we do have some liquidity there. You can exchange it for some. You can exchange it, but it's still not. Basically, what you're able to design this governance token however the community needs to achieve their goals is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
The
so,
utility of the governance token is what each community really holds and shapes things up. I think just to add a little more, this is more of a personal perspective. I absolutely agree with designing the utility tokens in a way and the utility of the tokens in a way that supports the community's mission